Thank you very much. I'm here to talk to you this morning about the Mayan Biosphere Reserve. This is a 2.1 million hectare area in the northern department of the Petén. USAID has been investing in this region for more than 25 years. Our investments has focused on building public and government of Guatemala support for the establishment of the reserve and its preservation. We also worked with local non-government organizations in order to advocate for conservation. And we also implemented a community forest concession model, one in which communities and people can work on long-term forest management for long-term conservation processes. The Mayan Biosphere, all our efforts were really focused on the environment and were, as mentioned previously, done in a silo. They were an end in and of themselves. But new challenges begin to threaten the Mayan Biosphere Reserve, among them the presence of organized crime and narco-trafficking in the area. With a very weak presence of state in this region, organized crime and narco-trafficking permeated the reserve, which resulted in illegal logging, in animal trafficking, and the destruction of vast areas of the forest to be used for illegal cattle farms. So it was time to try a new approach, one which would address both our citizen security goals and our environmental goals. To do this, what we had to do was to have an integrated approach because the environmental crimes were often intertwined with other forms of criminal activity. So we responded. We responded by increasing our citizen security project by 1.6 million using environmental funding rather than security funding. The goal of this project was to help the government of Guatemala implement key legislation. It had nothing to do with the environment. But through the increase in the total estimated cost of the contract and the inclusion of a specific lower level result to address environmental crimes, actions began to take place. Our first actions were focused on bringing environmental crimes into the attention of key security and justice sector authorities so that they would prioritize this type of crime. In a country as violent as Guatemala, they needed some incentives. In addition, we worked with local security and justice sector institutions so as to better implement environmental regulations and demonstrate that there is rule of law and that there are consequences to breaking the law in this region. So little by little, actions began to move forward and results began to be foreseen. This was the first time that we had, through a rule of law project, environmental achievements. So the results became, on July 3rd of 2015, Guatemala's first ever specialized environmental court was implemented in the Department of the Petén. To complement these efforts, the Attorney General implemented a specialized prosecutor's office for the investigation and prosecution of environmental crime in the area. These were brand new institutions with a bunch of potential. As these institutions began to operate, cases began to move through the system. Within the first 3 months, the number of cases had increased by 120%. In addition, things became more efficient. In all of 2015, only 15 final rulings had been issued on environmental crimes. If we compare that to the first quarter of 2016, 20 final verdicts have already been reached, demonstrating that the system is working and it is more efficient. An example of the types of cases managed by these courts is that of Miguel Palma, a well-known drug dealer who had invaded the reserve, cut down all of the trees, and established his own private cattle ranch within the reserve. Through the filing of complaints by civil society organizations, the environmental court in the Petén issued an eviction order to get him off the land. When the police showed up to carry out the eviction order, they were found by gunfire, and 14 police officers were wounded, and a prosecutor's car was set on fire. As a result of these actions, the judge then issued an arrest warrant for Mr. Palma, who is now in prison facing trial for assaulting the police officers, for the possession of illegal weapons, and for invading the Mayan Biosphere Reserve. There were consequences to this arrest. In fact, many communities who had also invaded the reserve and illegally are now voluntarily leaving, knowing that there are consequences to breaking the law and that rule of law has been established in the region. And this is an example of how through integrated programming, both citizen security and environmental goals can be met. Thank you.
Thank you.